In this video, we're going to look at English Language Paper 2, Question 5. So typically, if you're going to be asked to write an article, a speech, or a letter, I've put my direct knowledge there. Motif and figurative language alongside anecdotal structure are key to your successes in this question. A motif is an image that repeats. Figurative language is imagery. Even if you write an article or a letter, imagery is key. Within paper 2, we always talk about an anecdote or the P paragraph in the Poile structure. An anecdote is a personal story, and this is how you're going to open and end your writing. Okay, so I wouldn't get too hung up about different forms, but if you're asked to write a letter, ensure you have your addresses on there. Ensure that you begin with dear and then give them a name, because that means that you can end with yours sincerely and you don't need to worry about anything else. So always give them a name, dear, like that. If you write a speech, just ensure that you have direct address to your audience. So a bit like when you did spoken language, you should be asking questions, you should be using certain pronouns. We, us, our, you would be key pronouns. I would say if you're having a speech, have a single sentence that repeats throughout. We all know of speeches that have a single line that repeats, I have a dream or something like that. What you can do if you're asked to write a speech, you could have a one sentence paragraph that always repeats that line all the way through. I would also say to think about your interrogatives or your questions. Show that you're considering the audience by having rhetorical questions. If you're asked to write an article, typically you'll have a headline. We're going to discuss that in a second. We'll have a strap line that gives extra information, and look to see the opening with an anecdote. If it's an article, I like a third person anecdote where we create a character. Right, so in English Language Paper 2, you'll have a statement and you'll have to argue your view in relation to the statement. Don't argue both sides. So in an argument, we decide which side of the line we fall, if you will. So you're not going to say some people think this and some people think this. You're going to decide which side you're on. You're going to have an anecdotal opening. You're going to have argument paragraphs where you explain and give a reason for your opinion. We can't just say, I think this, I think this, I think this. We've got to say why. We're going to look to have elements of counter-argument where we consider what others think before then going on to kind of dismantle that argument or say why it's wrong. The word however is key in there. So many people believe that however, and then moving through. You'll see it as an example. Return to your anecdote at the end as part of a cyclical structure. So if I begin with an anecdote about a student struggling to revise, I go back to that student at the end. And, if it's kind of depressing and sad at the beginning, the final paragraph, the link paragraph, might have a change of tone. And like we said in the A statement, look to have extended imagery or a motif that runs through your text. That's really, really key. Right then, so I'm going to attach the Word document to the VLE to what I wrote here, but it's also on the PowerPoint as well. So in your exam, you get given a statement like that. Sports stars and film stars may have fame, fortune and status, but they can't be seen as true heroes. They exist closer to home. So write an article to be published in a broadsheet paper where you argue your view in relation to the statement. You might pause this video at this point and you might give yourself kind of 5 or 6 minutes and you might think, if this was my exam, how would I plan it? Right, in black on here then I've added my headline and my strap line. So my headline says fame, fortune, false. Forget your sporting heroes and look closer to home. And my strap line is despite earning eye-watering figures, famous people aren't our true idols in 2024. Again, you might pause this video at this point. You might think about that question and read, what am I doing in my headline and in my strapline to be successful? So for me, a headline should always follow this structure. So this sentence here, fame, fortune, false, colon, forget your sporting heroes and look close to home, is what we call a triple noun colon. 1, 2, 3, colon, main clause. Now, ideally, you'll have an alliterative headline. So I've got my fricative alliteration here, okay? I think that's what you want. If you're writing a speech, you're probably going to title your speech and you'll still use that sentence construction. 1, 2, 3, colon, main clause. My strapline makes my argument clear, and that is just a simple complex sentence. So despite is a subordinating sentence starter. So despite earning eye-watering figures, famous people aren't actually idols in 2024. Notice I've used eye-watering figures. In my strapline, I'm starting to bring metaphor in now. So the key thing that we've got, headline that begins 1, 2, 3, colon, main clause, show that we can use colon correctly, and then a strapline that has an element of metaphor in there. Right, so this is my anecdote, or my P paragraph, and it's a third person anecdote. So what you'll see in this is that I begin, it's an all 2024 day. In the bustling corridors of the hospital, amidst the cacophony of noisy and horrid footsteps, there exists a silent hero. Okay, so you might see that I talk about noise, but I have this image of silence as well. So you got that juxtaposition. My anecdote is based around a third person. I've created this character of a nurse who's working a lot, tending to the sick, comforting the distressed, saving lives. There's a couple of key sentence constructions that I really want you to focus in and talk about here. So, hours whirl by and days bleed into night, and then nights offer no respite to our battles. This is what we call a last word, first word sentence. So you write a simple sentence, and then the word that you end that sentence with begins the next one. Okay, so night and nights. You'll also see a repeat reload sentence. That's when we write a sentence with two adjectives, unnoticed, unrewarded. We write a colon, and then we use those words again in more detail. So our efforts go unnoticed and unrewarded. Unnoticed by the public mass, unrewarded by a complacent government. Repeat reload. If we can practice that sentence construction, we're using a colon correctly. You'll see that I've got a list. Compare this to glitz, glamour, and grandiose existence of sports stars. Ultimately, when you look at this, I want you to see, right, these elements of metaphor in there, days bleed into night, and there's also a lot of sentence variety. And that's the key to your success. So that's your anecdote. Create a person and describe them. Okay, so in the previous slide, we talked about the sentence constructions. So we talked about repeat reload, we talked about last word, first word. In this part of the text, we have the W paragraph. So that's where I say that true heroism is people who do normal things. Okay. Again, we've started to think about the imagery that we have there. You might notice that I use golden, I use silver, and I use bronze within that. It's about sports stars, so I've tried to extend the imagery. I then have my two argument paragraphs. Consider a nurse's daily routine, long hours spent on her feet, navigating through the chaos of emergencies and providing care to those in need. She doesn't bask in the spotlight or revel in applause. Humbly, she finds fulfillment in the satisfaction knowing that she's made a difference in someone's life. This is my first argument paragraph. And basically, I suggest in there that she's a hero because she works hard. Again, you might have a look at the sentences. We know that we've got a question mark. We know we've got a fronted adverbial with humbly. We know that we have got lists, sweat, bleed, and perspire. We know that we have got a sentence that begins with while. You'll also see that you've got a range of kind of tier 2 vocabulary. Fulfillment, unsung heroes, hedonistic, atmosphere, ephemeral, transient. It means they don't last. My second one is my second argument paragraph. And in this paragraph, I argue that we shouldn't really worship sports stars because all they are is lucky. Again, we're thinking about sentence construction. So I repeat my sentences here. 1, 2, 3. 3 questions next to each other. I use a colon before giving extra information. I use a fronted adverbial there. I've got the idea of lists. So at this point then we know that we need a counter argument. And a counter argument is when we say what other people think before going on to say why they're wrong. So if we look at the opening here, of course the cries will descend. Our sports stars demonstrate courage, compassion and selflessness in the face of adversity. It takes a life of dedication to find your way onto the hallowed turf of the Premier League or Wimbledon. That's when the counter argument starts. The counter argument is understanding that some people will say that sports stars work really hard and that's why they're heroes. Now you'll see my conjunction, but. That but is where we start to develop the counter argument. But take a minute to think. And that's when I go on to say why they are wrong. You'll see some words that I've taken from the poems at this point, okay? And from Lit 1 text, Golden Opinions, I've stolen that from Macbeth. Pedestal, I've taken that from Ozymandias. Heroism, something we talked about in Macbeth again. Precarious, something that is vulnerable. Basically, use your lit texts to develop your imagery. You might pause this, have a look, and you might just think, are there any words that I could steal from there? Right then, so at the end of your article or letter or speech, I'd like you to go back to your anecdote. I want you to return to that person or that feeling that you were talking about in the opening. Look at my final paragraph. It's the end of the night shift in the hospital. While sports starts might dazzle us, true heroism lies in the quiet courage and selflessness of these people. So basically, you've got a cyclical structure. Begin with your anecdote, end with your anecdote, and that should really make your argument obvious. At this point then, I'm going to give you an example question to have a look at. With my groups, we've been talking about checking out my history when I did this lesson. And within checking out my history, the speaker talks about how their education was bad because they were taught things that didn't have any relevance to them. So I've written a exam response based around that. Education needs to move with the times, it needs to be relevant, valued for all, and offer people an opportunity to understand where they come from. Write an article for a broadsheet newspaper where you argue your points in relation to this statement. 40 marks, 45 minutes. There's my plan. And you might pause this and have a look at this plan. If I was doing this in my exam, that's what I would do. Okay? So you'll see. I've planned I'm going to have a headline and strapline. I've planned what my anecdote is going to be. I'm going to have a single sentence, something like education has to be relevant to make my argument clear. They are my arguments about why education's got to change. My counter argument, and then we go back to the anecdote at the end. As part of your revision now, what I would do is I would give yourself 20 minutes and I would see if you can, in that 20 minutes, you could write your headline, strapline, your W, and your first argument. Think about those skills that we talked about. Have you got extended imagery? Have you got a variety of sentence constructions, sentence starters? Are you using punctuation well? Are you forcing your argument and making it clear? Okay, and there's my example that I wrote at the time with 11A5. Mundane, melancholy, monotonous, education needs to morph into the modern classroom. That's my headline. Notice that we've got that structure, 1, 2, 3, colon, main clause. Strapline with despite. And then there's my anecdote paragraph. Look at the final sentence of my annotated paragraph. This has to change, colon, now. Show that you can use your colon. You might see that I've got repetition. Dark thoughts invade. Dark minds are depressed. Darkness devours the sunlight of youth. Again, simple. 3 simple sentences that begin the same way. It's what we call parallelism. You'll see that I've got my metaphor again. I was bleeding to the days. Alright, so have a look at that and see if you can do your own. Best revision is by doing.